softball world has gone topsy-turvy. Last week, 7 of the top 10 ranked teams lost. 7 of 10! With the postseason fast approaching, how are we supposed to figure out who's likely to host regionals, host super regionals, or be in Oklahoma City for the Women's College World Series? Well, there's no one better to decipher all that than Tara Henry, General Manager of Softball America, coming up on the Jenni Carlson Show. But before we get to that, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my show. Just hit that subscribe button on YouTube. It's easy, but it helps me help you. So subscribe today. I also want to say thanks to these sponsors for supporting the Jenni Carlson Show. MidFirst Bank, Next Gen Roofing, Two Fellas Moving, the Oklahoma Ford Dealers Association. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. Well, Tara, thanks so much for joining us again on the show. Fun fact, you're our first return guest. Congratulations!
Oh my gosh, Jenni, what an honor. That's fantastic. I cannot
Only
wait.
seems fitting, though, since we're softball crazy here in Oklahoma, to have you on to talk some college softball. This is going to be great.
I can't wait. I mean, it has been wild in Oklahoma, and I can't wait to get into that one.
Yeah, well, crazy in Oklahoma, but also around the country. Can we start with the parity? Oh my goodness, last week, 7 of the top 10 losing. I mean, I call it parity. I don't know what you want to term it. It was last week an anomaly, or is this kind of where things are headed?
You know, it's such a great question, Jenni, and I think we're starting to see, I think it is parity, but also we're in that really interesting part of the season where, conference play has started. We're in the middle of it, in the middle of the grind. Players are traveling, they're in school. And so we're almost at the bottom of it. And I think next week and the week after, we'll actually see if it is true parity or if it's just a little bit of a slump of the season. But you're right. Last week, you've got that many top 10 teams losing, not only losing a game, but dropping series. It's just really unheard of and something that we've been tracking and keeping an eye on, but it's making for some fun polling voting on our end as well.
I don't know if I'd call it fun. I know every time I see those polls come out, and especially now, I'm like, boy, I'm glad I'm not involved in that. I don't know what I do with some of these teams right now.
Oh, it's fun. Actually, to be honest with you, Jenni, it's probably my favorite part of the week. I know everyone else struggles with it, but what I love is our community and our fan base and people that love softball. I love how invested they are. And the polls are something to have, a chat about. And I think that's the most important part of it. And at the end of the day, none of these polls mean anything. It's what happens between the white lines. So I don't always argue if you've been there and you've done that, the polls don't really mean much. Yes, you like the recognition, but what you do between the white lines is much more important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, a team that a lot of people, when they filled out ballots for polling, put at number 1 for a long, long time. OU, not number 1. They weren't last year. Duke moved into that spot. Now Texas in that spot there with your Softball America poll. But Sooners still 4 losses, tied with Duke for the fewest in the country. But obviously, that's about 4 more losses for OU than a lot of people expected this year because that bar is so crazy high. But what's your sense of the Sooners right now? Patty Gasso even said last week they're not good enough. What in your mind ails them right now?
I think we've been spoiled, Jenni. I think we have been, and we are witnessing one of the greatest, dynasties in the softball world. And we've seen waves of it. You saw UCLA, you saw the Arizonas, we watched Michigan get that first national championship in 2005. And then we saw, Alabama in 2012 get the first championship for the SEC. We see Florida come in there. And, I think we've been really, really spoiled for a team to only lose 4 games. Again, you're setting a really high bar in Oklahoma. And it's really a turning point for the Sooners. And it's going to go one way or the other. But I'd argue when you've got that much talent up and down the lineup, and a coaching staff that goes to work and understands how to get those players to play at their best when they need it, Jenni, I think that's the most important part. And I don't know that there's a lot of ails. I know we've got a lot of, we can look at the pitching staff and having a new pitching staff. I think the absence of Jordan Ball, you're starting to see that. And not only in the numbers, Jenni, but I truly believe in just the way she carries herself. When Jordy's in the circle, it's a different feeling and it's coming at you and she's stalking around the mound. And I think that's a different energy. So balancing that with a Kelly Maxwell, who is a lot more reserved, gets her work done, goes in the circle, gets it done, still spins it, and it's still an incredible arm by any means. But when you've got a pitcher that has less energy, I think that's a little bit of an impact for the Sooners. But nothing, again, I think we talked about this last time. I'm not concerned when you've got, again, that amount of talent with that coaching staff. And they're going to be battle tested. And I think we're going to see how OU responds. But again, I don't think anybody wants to draw OU in their regional bracket. I wouldn't be. I don't think that's going to happen. People are saying, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll take OU." I'm like,
that's right. Yeah, postseason. When you talk about knowing when to really kick it in, they seem to have that under control in the postseason. So, Oklahoma State, obviously, another top 5 team, top 10 pretty much all year, but has been in the top 5 regularly. But they had obviously their issues last week, losing not once but twice at Iowa State. Obviously they lose Kelly Maxwell. They've got a group of young players, whether sophomores or even freshmen, that they're depending on. Should we be more surprised that they lost 2 of 3 at Iowa State, or is such a thing maybe just become a little bit unexpected, sort of that expectation, which maybe the bar is not as high, but this is a team that's been to 4 consecutive Women's College World Series. How are we supposed to look at what happened to the Cowgirls last week?
Jenni, I think we've got to have some perspective. And if we take a look at the Cowgirls at the beginning of the season and told you that they would be where they're ranked number 6 in our poll, in Softball America's poll. If you told me the Cowgirls are going to be ranked number 6 and they're going to drop a series to Iowa State, I think you're shrugging your shoulders thinking, oh, that's a pretty darn good season, right? So I think we've got to put it into perspective. Now, again, that expectation is super high. Dropping a series is difficult, and dropping it to Iowa State, but you'd argue that the Big 12 at this point is just, it's tougher than it's ever been. And I'm not as concerned as well, again, when you've got Lexi Kilfoyle in the circle and you've got young talent, Carly Godwin at first. She's historically been a third baseman. She moves over to first. And what she's been able to do for them, and Caroline Wang behind the plate. I think you've got these new influx of, youth, but also veteran leadership. So again, when we talk about dropping games, I think that expectation is really high. You're going to lose games. Winning is hard. And I think people forget that winning consecutive games is hard, and winning consistently. But then you look back at this Cowgirls team that took a series from Texas.
Yeah.
Right? And then Texas turns around and takes a series from OU. And so, again, can we chalk that up to parity? Probably. We could chalk it up to the Big 12 being really, really tough this year. You take a look at UCF, who got kicked in the teeth in the beginning of Big 12 play, and now they've won their last 9 straight. So it's all about ebbs and flows, and it's all about getting your squad to play good at the right time. And so dropping a game to our series to Iowa State, not as concerned. I think if you start playing that towards the end of the season and heading into postseason, then you get a little bit more concerned.
Yeah, the Big 12, you've got the 3 at the top, and like you said, Oklahoma State's 6th right now, but they've had 3 of the top 5 in the country, and those 3 are now bunched at the top. Who comes out of this? For years, you just expected that OU was going to be the Big 12 champ, and that was sort of a foregone conclusion. Doesn't feel quite as foregone to me right now.
2 days ago, I was adamant that OU was going to, or 3 days ago, we're going to win this thing, then drop a game to BYU. So I don't know. I think it's still up in the air, and that's what makes it so fun. I know, obviously, we're looking at it from a national landscape or from a conference landscape. If you're a Sooner fan, I think you're sweating a little bit, which is good for the Sooner which is good for the Sooner fan base. I love them in general, and I think it's good. It brings you back to some reality, and hopefully some respect for a group that has done something that is really difficult to do. But when you take a look at it, Texas is primed to kind of run in and take that. But I'm going to be at Bedlam because I do think obviously that Oklahoma State series is going to be pivotal for that Big 12 championship, and just can't wait to see how this all shakes out.
Yeah, very fun. Well, as we talk about sort of the end of the regular season coming, it's also going to be award season. I want to get to some bracketology here in a second, but let's take a moment to talk about some of these individual awards. Who are you looking at nationally? You've mentioned a couple of players here locally that I think will factor in, whether it's Kelly Maxwell, Lexi Kilfoyle. But I know Najee Kennedy out at Stanford is amazing. We saw her last year in the Women's College World Series. But talk about some National Player of the Year candidates. Who's your front runner right now?
I mean, you've got to have Najee Kennedy in that conversation for Pitcher of the Year. She's just incredible and has been able to not only do what she did last year. It's hard when you come into your sophomore season because everyone has a ton of film on you. But she's been able to then come in and add in a new pitch and continues to dominate. And when she's in the circle, Stanford's just frankly really, really tough to beat. Jenna Golombowski out of Miami, Ohio, leading the country in home runs. Just what an incredible season for her. And then Madison Kennedy at Mississippi State, we were keeping track of her for a while, and what she's been able to do this season for Mississippi State has been really, really impressive. In the beginning of the season, we were tracking Reese Atwood and what she's been able to do for Texas. But again, when you take a look at the national landscape, you've got also, add in Tiare Jennings. I know Tiare Jennings is always at the top there, but so many incredible candidates that we're taking a look at, and just been really fun to watch performances throughout the year because it hasn't necessarily been the ones that we think, Jenni.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I mean, when you start talking about Stanford, okay, they're Women's College World Series team a year ago. But then you start talking about Miami of Ohio, Mississippi State. I mean, those teams could be Women's College World Series teams this year, but we haven't seen them historically be here to have that kind of individual talent. Does it get us back to the parity comment from earlier?
Yeah, I think we're circling back to it. And our Brady Vernon on the site, he just did a great piece on our Tuesday trends and looking into Big Ten Player of the Year race. And you're looking at, a kid from Rutgers, and you're looking at Nebraska, and you're looking at Minnesota. So Rutgers, Morgan Smith. It's just her, what she's been able to do. She's almost above 1,400 in OPS. Minnesota's Jess Oakland, and Northwestern's Kansas Robinson. So you look at a Big Ten conference that's historically down, but there's been some incredible performances in the Big Ten. So yes, Jenni, I mean, we're looking across the world. Maybe it's more media coverage. Maybe it's more, availability of players and coaches and us being able to see it. But I think it's been a fun season thus far to even chat about.
Yeah. You mentioned Brady Vernon there at Softball America. He's doing bracketology. Bracketology for college softball. But I want to get a little verklempt over here. It's so exciting. So talking about who makes the field, who hosts regionals, super regionals. Let's start with that 16, because while there's been so much movement, and I suspect there's going to be some teams that where they are in the rankings may be changing, but they may be more solid. But who should be worried right now? There's always going to be teams on the cusp. So who should be worried about regional hosting right now?
We were taking a look at UCLA, and I don't know if you realize this, Jenni, their games got canceled this past weekend against Cal. And so on that hosting bubble, huge implications for UCLA to not be able to get those games in. So an issue in terms of there's top seeds, but gosh, there's just been the RPI changes every week. I'm just pulling up Brady's bracket at the moment. And Mississippi State, like you said, they were potential hosts. Texas State at one point was going to be a potential host, but that RPI and what the selection committee looks at, you've got, a lot of programs that are sitting in the driver's seat. And could Louisiana get in with that tough schedule? But again, when you take a look at the bracket, we've got our April 17th bracket up on the website on softballamerica.com. And Austin sitting, or, Texas would be that number one seed, and Oklahoma the number two. But when you take a look at who could potentially, miss out, we've got Arkansas in there as a host as well, and loads of SEC teams. So, gosh, again, it's so hard to say at the moment, but it's going to be interesting as it finally shakes out.
Yeah, those group of 5 and mid-major teams, anytime they can host, I think about James Madison hosting in the past, teams that maybe haven't been as regular a host. You get to see a different crowd, you get to see a different energy. That's always so interesting at the regional level. But obviously those teams that are pushing for Oklahoma City want to be super regional hosts. And like you said, RPI tends to be shifting, but I think about Oklahoma State. They're looking pretty strong for a super regional spot, but are they amongst the teams that really have to guard against falling too low for a super regional spot?
Yeah, I mean, when you take a look at what we've got laid out on that April 17th bracketology, we've got Stillwater as the 12th seed. And, you take a look at, Florida State, obviously a household name is left out of the seeding. And, that 8-9 position, you got Mizzou and Arkansas in those 8 and 9 slots. So it's when you take a look at Oklahoma State, the RPI dropped for that series loss at Iowa State. So big implications there for the Cowgirls. So hopefully they can get some of that back. But Louisiana would get the final host spot over Florida State and Auburn in this projected bracket. And I think that's also something that, again, we'll chalk it up to parity. And we'll see if they do give it to the mid-major. You'd love to see Jerry Glasgow get that for Louisiana, because it's not historically something that, the committee does. But I think the Raging Cajuns have earned it.
What about teams getting Oklahoma City? I'm not going to ask you to pick a national champion at this point, because just figuring out who's going to get there feels difficult enough. But do you feel like we're going to see a fairly big slate of regulars, whether that's OU, Texas, Stanford, Tennessee's become a regular in a lot of ways, or are we going to see a field that has some new faces in it?
I think we're going to see a little bit of both. I think when you take a look at the national landscape, you got good pitching and good defense and timely hitting. I know it's something that we always say, but those 3 things are going to get you there. And Texas, I think with that pitching staff and how Mike White's got that team playing right now, I think they're going to be in there. UCLA, they've gone through a lot of struggles throughout the season. Started with a really rough season for the Bruins, and you'd argue that they've become more of a gritty team than we're used to seeing. So are we going to see a battle-tested Bruins make it all the way through? Again, it's going to be that pitching staff with Caitlin Terry and Taylor Tinsley. But, can Mississippi State make a run? They've had quite the season, and Samantha Ricketts, what she's been able to do there, we could see a Mississippi State at the Women's College World Series. But I do think we'll see a few of our regular ones there. But again, when you chalk this up to some parity throughout the country, if we look at this Athens regional, you could easily see Virginia Tech getting out of the Athens regional and taking on Georgia there and getting through. So again, I think we're going to see a big mix. But yeah, not quite sure at the moment who we'd pick. Yeah. If I look back at my early picks, I think I'm probably going to change them.
Well, I think that's understandable at this point. And by the way, if Mississippi State makes Oklahoma City, as long as they bring the cowbells, they can come. That's all I got to say. As long as they bring the cowbells, if Louisiana makes it, they got to bring some etouffee. I mean, we've got some expectations here in Oklahoma City, for crying out loud.
Well, and I can't forgetting Texas A&M. I just saw Texas A&M this past weekend play Alabama, and what Trisha Ford's been able to do in her second season there. We could see the Aggies back in the Women's College World Series. And Arkansas is playing some pretty good ball right now. So, I think it's anybody's game. And again, it's going to be who gets hot at the right moment and whose bats stay hot and who can play great defense behind some solid pitching. So, I'd like to say that I answered your question, Jenny, but I feel like I just danced around it.
Hey, right now, the way things are going, totally understandable. Hey, before we let you get out of here, Tara, please tell people where they can find your stuff, both Softball America and also any social media.
Yeah, so head on over to softballamerica.com. We're going to have loads of content, obviously, heading into the postseason, but got all kinds of podcasts. We've got the Softball America Podcast Network. We've got 8 different shows, and you can filter it by conference. We've got Walton's World with Coach Tim Walton of Florida, and our weekly podcast. And if you want to get in contact with us, you can always reach out to myself or Brady on Twitter or X, and send us a message at hello@softballamerica.com. And anything you guys have questions about, we're always trying to answer them all. So thank you, and appreciate all of the softball world for just their continued support.
Awesome. Well, here, if people in Oklahoma want to see you, Bedlam is it. And then I know we'll see you once the postseason gets going. So thanks for joining us. Maybe we'll have to have a little synergy when you're in Norman here in a few weeks.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see Love's Field for the first time. I'm giddy. I'm so excited. I can't wait to be there. I heard it's amazing, and I can't wait to see you, Jenni. And as always, anything you need from us, just let us know.
Awesome. Thanks, Tara. Appreciate you. Thanks so much for joining us this week. Remember, subscribe to my show. It helps me to help you. And if you like what you hear, please leave a comment. You can also find my columns, videos, and podcasts at selloutcrowd.com. You can go there and sign up for our newsletters too. Our content will be sent straight to your inbox. It's free and it's easy. Just head to selloutcrowd.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.